preventive medicine. She divides her time between Manhattan in US and Banaras in India. She has published various books and is also one of the best-selling author in Ayurveda on various works that she has done. Her work through the Din Acharya Institute focuses on bringing the wisdom and science of authentic traditional medicine such as Ayurveda back to the hands and hearts of the people. Since 2003, she serves as Clinical Assistant Professor of Family Medicine in the Department of Medicine at Cornell Medical College in New York. In fact, she is having multiple PhDs. She has recently completed a PhD in Ayurvedic Chemistry, Pharmaceutics and Pharmacology from Banaras Hindu University, focusing specially on polyherbal formulations for diabetics. She was also recently awarded a Fulbright Specialist in Global Public Health, specializing in integrative medicine. A documentary film on her work, Healer's Journey into Ayurveda, was live on the Discovery Channel worldwide. Our first book, Everyday Ayurveda, is one of the national bestseller worldwide, published by Penguin Random House in 2015. So Dr. Bhattacharya is basically a pharmacologist and allopathic medicine physician in the USA and an expert in Ayurvedic chemistry and pharmaceutics from Banaras Hindu University. Madam, if I keep continuing your biodata, it will be a too long one. So I am cut shorting here with apologies because we are running short of time. Madam, on behalf of Vishweshwara Industrial and Technological Museum, I would like to extend a warm welcome to you, Madam, for this afternoon's program. The participants are requested to kindly mute your audio and video during the presentation. During or after the talk, the participants may use the chat option to post their questions. The participants joining through the Facebook may also post their questions using the chat option. Now, I would call upon Dr. Bhaswati Bhattacharya to take the dais and enlighten all of us on today's topic, namely wars and ecosystems, antibiotics, superbugs, and Ayurveda. Madam, the stage is yours. As I sign off, waiting for your talk. Welcome you onto the program once again, Madam.
Thank you, Dr. Madan Gopal. Thank you very much. And welcome to all of you who are here. Am I audible?
Yes, Madam, you are audible, Madam.
Very good. So I'm having some internet problems. I'm sitting in Udupi right now, and there are some delays. So if you can't hear me, please type in the chat. I'll keep the chat open, and we'll see if we can make sure to keep the flow going. I'm going to opt not to use PowerPoint slides because it'll slow down my speaking, but I think that you can follow me. Yes? Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I have a rotating wheel on my Mac, which tells me that I'm in some kind of unstable condition. So I'm not sure. What I'll do is I'll leave my phone's WhatsApp open, and Dr. Madan Gopal, if you can let me know if you can't hear me, I'll respond to that so that I have a form of feedback. Because I'll invite you all, if you want to turn on your videos, so that I can interact with you. Because when I was in school in the US, in India, what we do is we come to class, we sit, someone comes to the front of the classroom, lectures to us and leaves. But I did not grow up that way. My parents always taught me sitting in front of me. And when I was in Gurukul, my guru would sit in front of me, or the guru bandhas, the guru friends. Guru bandhu means, like a colleague in your Gurukul. And when I was at Harvard, everything was case-based, so it was interactive. And my medical school was all interactive. I didn't have a single lecture during medical school. So I'm used to speaking in an interactive way. And I hope that any of you who want to put on your videos will do so. The topic today is purposefully provocative. It's called Wars versus Ecosystems, the melding of antibiotics, superbugs, and Ayurveda. And the topic depends on people understanding each of those.
Dear participants, we are sorry for the interruption. There has been some problem with the connectivity. We are just trying to connect you back to the speaker. Please hold on and bear with us till then. Dear participants, please hold on. We are just trying to connect back to the speaker. We are sorry for the connectivity issues. Madam, I think, madam, you can continue. There has been some connectivity issues. It's okay.
Connectivity issues on my side or on your side?
Madam, on your side, madam.
Yeah. What's the last thing I was speaking about?
Yeah, you had just started, madam, and I think you were just giving the introduction part, and you can continue.
Oh, I missed. Did you get to hear about the gunpowder and the wars? Did you hear
Madam,
any of that?
you were about to start that, madam.
Oh, okay. I'll start again. So sorry for that. This is one of our technology challenges. I'm going to just start again. So the topic today is the wars versus ecosystems, and we're talking about antibiotics, superbugs, and Ayurveda. And I apologize for things that I cannot control here, which is the internet in Udupi. So first, in this topic, we have to understand these words, right? So in Ayurveda, we call it paribhasha. It is understanding the vocabulary. So I had just started speaking about wars, and I'll just repeat what I said. So when we talk about wars versus ecosystems, we have to remember that wars are not just the wars that we know about, whether we are young adults or older adults, or whether we fought in the partition, 70 some years ago, or World War II, but we also know wars from the times before gunpowder. Those wars are the wars that are waged every day for the last several millennia, actually thousands of millennia, which are waged in the forests between plants and between animals. So if you look at a plant, there's a sapling trying to grow in the forest, and it wages the war for survival because as it tries to grow, an animal can come and stomp on it and prevent it from growing. Or a vine can come and grow around it and secrete toxic chemicals as it's growing, so that it will prevent the further growth of that tree. And so there's a war going on between those viruses, those poisonous plants, the trees that sometimes have poisonous chemicals in them, and they have to find a way to win that war and survive. In addition, there are animals. So we usually learn in school, in science class, about the food chain. So there's a big animal that eats the animal that it attacks. So that's called the predator. And that animal that it eats is called the prey. But that prey is also a predator of another animal that it ate to get big, which is the predator of another animal and another, till it goes all the way down the food chain to the smallest animals, which are actually unicellular bacteria. So we like to think that we are at the top of the food chain, being superior humans. But in fact, lions and tigers used to eat us as humans. So what man did is created tools and created defense strategies so that we killed those lions and killed those tigers so that they can't attack us anymore. And we considered ourselves champions. And now the humans are at the top of the food chain. But if you think about this entire war that we have waged against other animals, you cannot win a war if you are out of balance in the ecosystem. And I think we all know that with 7+ billion people on the planet everywhere, we are actually not ecologically balanced. We are affecting the climate, we are affecting the universe around us, whether it's the environment, as we call it, the water, the air, the plants, the trees, but we are adversely affecting many of the environments which we came into, which were very pristine and pure just 200 or 100 years ago. And by building dams and by building large power plants, we call it development, vikas, right? Vikas is superior. But if we don't do it in a balanced way, then we are creating a war with our environment and an imbalance in our ecosystem. And if we look at war before it was waged 100 years ago, I had just started talking about the Nobel consequence. So Alfred Nobel, most of you know about the Nobel Prizes. Alfred Nobel had worked with gunpowder, and what he had done is created artillery that then changed the entire game of war. Instead of needing to be close to someone and shoot them with an arrow and a bow, or with throwing a rock at them, or fighting them hand on hand or with a sword, you could now stand very far away, like James Bond does, and shoot with a gun or with a rifle or with a shotgun or with a cannon or with these large substances. And if they were filled with gunpowder, not only would they have the impact that happens with quickness, but they would explode. And so with the chemicals, there are just 3 chemicals inside of gunpowder, and put together, they create a reaction that explodes inside and kills people. Alfred Nobel invented this using the wonders of chemistry, but when he realized the danger of his invention, he became remorseful. And that sorry attitude, which we would say here in India, is that he felt that he had done papam, led him to take all of his profits and say, I'm going to create an organization where people can learn from my mistakes of giving gunpowder to the world. And so he created the Nobel Prizes. And that's what we all now worship as the greatest achievements in science. But actually, they are achievements sitting on the shoulders of a man who misused science against the ecosystems. So when you think about ecosystems in a larger way, you realize that man had been fighting war before, but when he used bow and arrow like they did in the Mahabharata or in the Ramayana, and when they used fighting with martial arts like they do in Kalaripayattu in Kerala, or the martial arts that went from Kalaripayattu up through the Shaolin monasteries across East Asia to China, Korea, Japan, and created all the martial arts that you've heard of, Kung Fu and Aikido and Bagua. Those forms of fighting did not disturb the ecosystems. So war and ecosystem needs to be thought about at every point. If we go back to those forests and the way that they fought, plants are actually our greatest chemists on this planet. They make nanoparticles. They know how to harvest metals and put them in their own bodies. What we have is hemoglobin. All of you have heard of hemoglobin. It's filled with iron. So in a plant, they actually use more copper. Sometimes they use some of the other metals like molybdenum or magnesium. And they use that as a way of transporting oxygen and fluids and minerals throughout their body, through their blood vessels, which are called the xylem and phloem, mostly phloem. And they make these chemicals. And they make them so that they can fight their wars. And their wars are wars against other plants who are secreting toxins, as I mentioned earlier. So now we come to the other 3 words: superbugs, antibiotics, and Ayurveda. Superbugs, as you all know, or if you haven't visited the exhibit, you should. The superbugs are the bugs that our antibiotics can't kill. So what are antibiotics? They are generally chemicals that have been isolated either from a laboratory formulation, or actually there's an article in a book called Biodiversity and Human Health, in which a group of us analyzed the top 150 pharmaceutical drugs and found that most of those drugs, including the antibiotics, come from botanical origins. Botanical origins means any kind of plant, a tree, a shrub, and sometimes an animal, but usually botanical means the plants. Those antibiotics actually have been isolated and are the basis of a lot of the pharmaceutical products that we sell. The first one, as most of you know, came from a fungus called penicillium, and it secreted a particular chemical which we call as penicillin. And penicillin was very much touted. There's an exhibit in the Superbugs exhibition that talks about penicillin and how it came about. But it should be known that that fungus was actually not a plant. Fungi are a different kingdom than plant or animal. They're kind of in the middle, because fungi have special properties of changing inorganic materials to organic and vice versa. And this particular fungus created this penicillin molecule that wiped out a lot of bacteria. And so the scientist Fleming found it and said, okay, So let's try to use this for some of the bacterial infections man has. That was hardly 100 years ago. It's a little more than 100 years ago. And what he did was so amazing for people who were dying of bacterial infections that it just swept the entire world with amazing antibiotics. And because it sold, and the companies that sold penicillin made so much money, those who are oriented toward making money said, this is a great formula. We'll just find new antibiotics and we'll give them to people who have bacterial and infections in their body. We'll save lives and we'll make lots of money. And so there was a burgeoning, a whole mushrooming, no pun intended, a mushrooming of new chemicals, new products, new antibiotics. And as the antibiotics started developing, there were penicillins, and there were next generation and next generation. Well, we are smart, but the bacteria were smarter. And the bacteria that said, we'll just change the way that that molecule kills us, they became more invincible, we can say. And when they became invincible, man said, fine, then we'll give 2 antibiotics, we'll give 3 antibiotics, we'll give 4 antibiotics. And they started increasing antibiotics, and then they started changing the formulation so that 2 things that 2 different products would do would go into one molecule so that they could kill together. And so we had for 100 years, not quite 100, because we started seeing problems within half a century. We knew that there were some problems of what we call resistance. Resistance means that the bacteria say, sorry, I don't want to die with your antibiotic. I am going to apply my own extra wall. So just as soldiers put on armor, the bacteria put on new armor, and they created new proteins and new walls against those bacteria. So that's the overview of how the bacteria created defenses against the antibiotics that were designed to kill those bacteria. And those bacteria that have succeeded are called superbugs. Why? Because we can't kill them with our normal antibiotics that we've been using for 100 years. So you may have heard of MRSA. MRSA is MRSA. It's methicillin, which is a type of penicillin. It's a sister of penicillin. Resistant, methicillin resistant. And then there's a bacterium called Staphylococcus aureus, which is a golden, aureus means gold. Staphylococcus is a type of bacteria that has kind of a gold colored tinge to it. And also when it fights with the human white blood cells, the pus looks a little bit yellow as well from those bacteria. So Staph aureus, that is resistant to the penicillin that used to die from, is now called a superbug. So when people have MRSA infections, that means the Staphylococcus grows and starts eating out their entire body. That's kind of gross. And they die. And so this bug started spreading. And who does it attack? It won't attack you and me if we're healthy. It'll attack those sick patients that are already in the hospital. So if one guy is sick in the hospital and there's another guy near him and he catches that bug, then that created problems. And this was a big deal. And now there are VRE, there's a whole bunch of different types of these superbug infections. So it's not that we want to understand the importance of using antibiotics, it's that we want to understand the importance of not overusing antibiotics. So you've noticed that I've been talking about bacteria. Well, there are other kinds of bugs. There are microscopic worms, which are called parasites. There are one-celled organisms that are bacteria, not bacteria, but they're slightly different in their structure. And there are viruses. And you guys have all been hearing about viruses a lot in 2020 for some obvious reason, right? So we all know that viruses are very different in their structure and in the way that they work than the bacteria are. And most antibiotics are against the bacteria. So a few years ago, actually now we look at about 40 years ago, there was a big virus that came through called the HIV virus, right? The human immunodeficiency virus. And most of the antibiotics that were tried on it obviously didn't work because they were working for bacteria. So the viruses needed a different level of protection or of a way to kill those viruses. Sorry, we needed the protection, the viruses needed to be killed. and we weren't able to find it. So there was a second virus called the hepatitis virus, and there were a few antivirals. So they killed the viruses, and they tried them they tried them on hepatitis. There are like 6 or 7 different types of hepatitis, and they tried them with HIV, and they found that it didn't work. So there was a huge increase in funding to find new HIV antiviral drugs, and those became very quickly resistant. So those are also kind of superbugs, but they don't really call them superbugs because in HIV, we already knew from the beginning that that tendency to mutate, right, to change, to transform so that they have extra armor on them, made them superbugs as well. So this idea of superbugs should be really clear to you now, and the idea of what antibiotics should do should be very clear to you now. So Ayurveda, which is one of the areas that I have grown to really love and specialize in because I found how it works so well when modern medicine doesn't. It's allowed me to take my modern medical white coat and stethoscope and black bag and add to it an entire group of other medicines that I'm going to now talk about. So Ayurveda looks at nature and looks at the patterns in the forests and the trees, and it says, those nanotechnologies that we just talked about earlier that are very good at killing other predators, but doing it in a balanced way. They don't use gunpowder, and they don't use very, bulldozers and big things that will kill everything. They're very pointed, they're very elegant, like a bow and arrow. And they just go in and they kill only what's needed and leave everything else living. That is how trees keep the balance of the ecosystem while still fighting the war. So what Ayurveda has is knowledge of how those trees kill the bacteria and viruses and parasites and worms and fungi that come and try to latch on to their leaves or their stem or their bark or their roots. And as you know, trees can't just get up and walk over to the pharmacy or the medical store, right? So they have to make everything they need inside of themselves. So what do trees do? They draw their roots down into the soil, very deep, and they pull out those building blocks, those Lego blocks that they need in order to build what they would need to build, which are these complex molecules. And those building blocks and the blueprint for those is the genius of these nanotechnologists called trees. So Ayurveda watched that and they said, we noticed that this particular plant doesn't get the same bug that everyone else does. Let's pick it out of the ground. Here's this beautiful red flower. I had a photo in my PowerPoint slides of this beautiful red flower on this stalk. And you pull it out and there's this bright orange kind of part that's just at the level of the soil and then goes kind of deeper into the soil. It's called a rhizome. Can anyone guess what that rhizome is? Yes, it's turmeric. We call it haldi in Hindi. We call it holud in Bangla. I'm Bengali. Or we call it haridra in Sanskrit. So turmeric has been found to have abundant antiviral, antibacterial, antiparasitic, and antifungal properties. And that's been done by microbiologists. And it's also been done experiments on humans because we know turmeric sitting in our kitchen, right? So we know that it works. And we can denigrate or insult all of the grandmas who have all those folk remedies. But the fact is that if you grew up on folk remedies, which you did if you're a real Indian, you know that anytime you came inside from playing and cutting yourself, you say, Ma, I have this pain here. I've cut myself. Right? Your mother would quickly take it, wash it in some water, and take her spoon of turmeric powder and just sprinkle it onto there. And you would have a yellow, wound of war from the battle that you'd wage, and you'd go outside and show your friends and say, see, I got hurt. This is my turmeric that my mom put on it. That turmeric was not only an antibacterial, it was also a hemostatic. That means it stasis, stops, hemo, blood. Hemostatic means it's a blood stopper, so you wouldn't keep bleeding. And it's an anti-inflammatory. So you don't have to take any paracetamol. If you just put it there, your skin, which had been starting to swell, would just come down in swelling. In fact, it's also used in Bengal and in many parts of India that if you break a bone, you will see that there will be a lot of swelling in that area. So if you have nothing else, you can put some turmeric on that area, and it will bring down the swelling until you have time to go and either set the bone or go to a doctor and have it taken care of in a deeper way. And use of turmeric has also been added to another compound that is made in nature, which is called limestone or choon. Choon is that white stuff that you see those addicts of pan putting on the betel leaf, because it's got a very astringent property. It's like a whitish gray. So you mix that choon with some turmeric and you heat it up slightly, and it turns from this bright orange to a bright red. And you put that on the place where your bone has broken, and it will suck out the extra fluid, and fluid is what allows the bacteria to grow. So these kind of what we call home remedies or folk remedies or grandmother's remedies are actually science. They are chemistry, and they are evidence-based chemistry, because people have been watching how they work, repeating it, it's replicable, and they've been seeing that actually this is a really great way to affect antibiotic, what shall we say? I don't want to use the word antibiotic because that usually refers to a pill. It's a way to fight bacteria from growing in the system. So Ayurveda uses turmeric. It also uses many other plants that have antibiotic properties. So another one you must know is neem. Everyone has seen the neem tree. Neem grows throughout India, right? Its botanical name is Azadirachta indica, but we don't say that word unless we're in America. We say neem because everyone knows neem. And in neem, we can use the leaves, we can use the bark, we can use the stems, and we can use the root, but we don't because it will kill the tree. So if you take some of the bark, the chal as it's called, or the twak, the chal of that is taken and it is boiled, and the liquid that comes out from it that's soluble in the water is very, very good to drink. It's also good to put as a, you can soak cotton in it, so you can call it like a poultice. It's not a poultice, it's a pichu. How will I say that in English? It's basically cloth dipped in that medicinal fluid, and you can put it on skin lesions or rashes. And the neem has a powerful antibacterial. So these all have chemical names that you can go and learn. You can go online and just search neem antibiotic chemicals and you'll find them. But the point is that these azadirachtocydes, as some of them are called, these chemicals have potent antibacterial properties. So when people have lice in their hair, or scabies, which is a bug, a very small bug that grows in the hair, right? It's a hair infection. Or if they have a rash from a bug bite or a small insect bite, if you just take some of that neem and you put it there, or you take the leaf and you pound it, and you take that oil and water that comes out from that leaf. It's called swara. Swa means self, ras means fluid. So it's the self-contained fluid in that leaf. You can make that and put it on as a lepa. Lepa is a Sanskrit word for poultice. These are different ways that neem is used. We can also take the stem, split it in half the long way, hand the other half to a friend, take that half and suck on it and bite on it and use it as a morning toothbrush. And it will actually get rid of all the bacteria that are lining the gingiva, which is the area between the gums and the teeth. And it makes your teeth cleaner than any other. There's bubble, there's khadira, and there's neem. These three branches are the ones that we use in India for the last few thousand years. And if you see the people that use it, they don't lose their teeth at the age of 90. Whereas if you go to the countries that use toothpaste with antibacterial chemicals, they're losing their teeth at the age of 50 and getting dentures. So Ayurveda has watched for thousands of years to see these different chemicals in these plants in the forest that themselves produce the chemicals so that they did not have to, they couldn't walk over to the pharmacy, but they also didn't have to go begging and borrowing from anywhere. They just made the chemicals within themselves. If you want to boost or fortify your own immune system, there's another herb called Guruchi. So if there's a plentitude of, let's say, viruses, some unknown virus in the environment that you might or might not catch, then if you fortify your immune system with Guruchi, Guruchi is botanically called Tinospora cordifolia, but Guruchi is the Sanskrit name. And in Hindi, it's called Giloy, or you can hear Gilroy. There's a few different names in different parts of India for Guruchi. And Guruchi can be found in medicines, at least 15 or 20 common formulations. So these are some of the plants. The second part was actually what my PhD thesis worked on, which was called Bhasma. So in Bangla, we say Bhasho. In Hindi, we say Bhasma or Bhasam in Hindi, and in Sanskrit, Bhasma. Bhasmas are metals and minerals which are taken and they are heated up on a fire, just like you'd heat up a stone. And then they are dropped into first an acid, and then heated again, dropped in the acid, heated again, dropped in the acid 7 times. Every stone has a different way and a different kind of recipe for how to pull out the actual metal. After that, it's thrown into more of a basic substance. So, for example, we can use the kanji, the water above the rice, right? The very soupy kind of rice. We can use kulata kwat. We can use a decoction of a particular bean that's called kulata. That's a kind of dal. It's a gram that we use. We can use gomutra, which is the urine of cows, female cows, right? We can use so many different of these solvents or these different liquid solutions, and we dip the metal into it, and each metal has a different way of being extracted. And this is the process of, it's the first of many processes, but the whole process called Sattva Patana, bringing out the Sattva or the essence. So when we purify these metals using these process of dipping, heating, dipping, heating, dipping, heating, one process takes 35 cycles. So that's at least, to heat it and quench it in the cooling and do it again. It will take you a minimum of, 7 or 10 days just to do that one rock. So people take collections of rocks together, like a kilo of rocks or 2 or 5 or 10 kilos, and dip them together and bring them out and dip them. So if you've ever watched this process, it is very scientific, it is very elegant, but the starting material varies. It's not the same because rocks from different parts of the world are different. Once you take that out, then you have small rocks. The rocks actually fall apart. Even a big, thick rock, even a piece of concrete will fall apart because of that cycling. Then you put it in heat, and this is extreme heat, like what's used to purify iron and steel. So we're talking 600, 800,000 degrees of temperature. And there are distinct musa. Musa is the crucible or the instruments that are used. And there are putas, which are these big ovens that are made. And if you go to Benares Hindu University, where I worked on my PhD, the head of department who was there for many decades, Dr. Chandrabhushan Ja, he's actually a living legend of how to take these rocks and make bhasmas and then give them to patients. And he's been doing this for over 40 years. So I went and studied with him. And when you put them in the incineration, you take them out, they slowly start moving from being a big rock into being a smaller particle that's a millimeter in size. And then you do the cycle again, and they become a micrometer in size, which is 10 to the minus 6. And then you do it a few more times, and it becomes 10 to the minus 9, which is a nanoparticle. And so what we find in these big rocks that have now been burned again and again and again is that they become nanoparticles, which means that they can penetrate into our bodies, and they can actually have an osmotic effect, and they can affect the bacteria. So to finish this story, I mean, it's a very long story, but just to finish this introduction to it, we, between each cycle, grind it again and again with plants that are specifically known for different effects. So if you're trying to have an antibiotic effect, you could use those neem leaves or the neem bark to crush with that metal. And what you'll create is a very effective antibiotic, which has metals in it that those plant enzymes and plant components from the tree that you use are going to capture those metals. And then when they're incinerated, those metals are going to become smaller and smaller and smaller. And when they're delivered to the human body, they have amazing effects. So in Ayurveda, what we've been using for antiviral, if anyone has a fever that they cannot control in the very beginning and they're starting to get a dry cough or they're starting to have respiratory symptoms, immediately we give them something called Jai Mangala Ras. Jai Mangala Ras is found at any Ayurvedic dispensary or store. You should go to an Ayurvedic doctor to make sure that that's the right one. But every Ayurvedic doctor, of which there are 600,000 in India and maybe about 5,000 outside of India, they know how to give these medicines because they are among the best antibiotics out there for viruses. And I shouldn't say antibiotics, I should say antiviral, because they're really working on viruses as well as bacteria. So between Bhasmas and Guruchi and neem and turmeric, and there's a few others like kalmeg, and there are actually, I think, I'm trying to remember the exhibit, I think there's about 12 different plants that you can go and read about at the exhibit. And when you're there, you'll see a video that talks about it, and you'll see some outlines of each of those plants that will introduce you to the world of the natural ecosystem and the natural warriors, bows and arrows, which are here to help us get over this immense problem we're having with superbugs. There is one problem that you have to remember, though. You see, the antibiotics make a lot of money for the pharmaceutical companies. And so there are many of them who do not want to see you using neem or turmeric because you're not going to end up buying a 50 rupee pill if you can just go out to your backyard and get a tree and use your neem leaves. So there's a whole, what shall we say, discussion going on that's not so friendly between the Ayurvedic doctors that say, yes, we want to use our plants, and the people who want to use drugs that say, no, these are quicker and better for us if you use them. And that is something that I think the common person can understand and say, well, there are times when we should use antibiotics where it's very important and it's a life-saving measure. And I know as a doctor have prescribed thousands of antibiotics. But there are also times when these antibiotics only create superbugs. And that is what this exhibit is trying to teach you, that please don't create more superbugs. Know when to use the antibiotics and know when not to pop them like gems candies, but instead use some of the herbals so that you don't create superbugs. So I am going to end here. I'm sorry that I haven't been able to see any questions, but maybe, sir, you can help me if there are any questions on the chat. And I thank you all for listening to me and for participating. Namaskar.
Namaskar, madam. And since it's been a wonderful experience where you have taken us through, starting from the gunpowder and how plants fight against the microorganisms by developing their own chemicals and how we can harvest those chemicals for our benefit. And I'm happy to note that you started off with the gunpowder and talked about superbugs, antibiotics, Ayurveda, and the importance of some of the things like turmeric, limestone, and then the way the turmeric and turmeric is useful as antibacterial drug, antiviral drug, antifungal drug, antimicrobial drugs, homeostasis, etc. It's a whole lot of information that you have passed on to us. And also, we are happy to note that you spoke on the way the Basmas are made at the nano level, through which these can enter into our skin and act on our thing, and including, of course, the kulota and gomutra and all those things. Madam, it was really very enterprising listening to all of you. But then, madam, I'm just seeing a question on the chat board, and I'm sure you must also be seeing this question. The question is something like this. I heard that the dandruff in head scalp is caused by some bacteria and also causes the hair fall. So what would be the best Ayurvedic remedy for such bacterial infection? This is the question that just come up on the chat box, madam.
So thanks to Miss or Mr. Vishwanath for asking this question. Dandruff is different for different people. Yes, it is true that sometimes it's because of bacteria, but it's more true for people to have dandruff when they don't take care of their dinacharya, which means their daily routine. We should wash our hair every day. Now, I know that the French didn't wash their hair because they had fancy hairdos, and so they would just put powder and wigs and things on their hair. But in India, we put oil in our hair and we wash our hair. So it's important that you wash your hair with water every day. And when it gets too sweaty or too dirty because you've been playing outside or you're working on a farm, on those days, you should do something to clean your scalp. And if you don't do it, that is what causes the infections and the eventual presence of dandruff and maybe even the bacteria that come in and say, wow, there's all this dandruff. It's good food for us. We can eat this. So to prevent the beginnings of this, I'm sorry, there's some background noise. If you could just mute, someone is off mute. So if you start out and you look at what's going on in your scalp and you say, okay, there's just dandruff, then you can just put some oil on your hair overnight or even for 1 or 2 hours and then wash it. But you don't want to wash it with this very drying shampoo. Most of the shampoos use something that's non-greasy, which is called paraffin, and it ruins the hair, and that's why a lot of people get hair fall. And so a lot of these brand name shampoos, if you can turn around the back and read those ingredients, if you can't even pronounce those ingredients, then there's a problem. So what Ayurveda says, well, I'll give you the easiest. There's about 5 or 6 things you can do, but the easiest is to get green gram, right? Moong dal. So moong dal in the green form is, if you take off the shell, it becomes yellow inside. So you take the green whole moong dal, you can buy it, it's like 40 rupees a kilo, and you put it through a grinder, either peshna yourself or put it through a mixie or a blender and make fine powder from it. Then you take about a tablespoon of that and you put it in some water and make it a thick consistency, like a shampoo consistency, right? Liquid shampoo consistency. And you just put it all over your hair for 5 or 10 minutes and then you wash it out. And if you do that for the first 1 week, it'll feel weird because you'll feel like there's extra oil coming up. And the reason is because people who shampoo their hair every day with commercial shampoo deplete the natural oils that hold onto the hair follicle. And so it gets super dry. So the body tries to put out more oil to replenish that. But if you stop depleting it from the end, right, from the shampoo, then that extra oil doesn't need to be produced. So it takes about a week to do that. And then after about a week, you'll notice that your hair actually stops graying, stops falling out, and is much more moist at the hair follicle and is stronger and doesn't break. Now, this does not always apply for people with genetic pattern baldness, the one that men get and sometimes starts showing up at the age of 30 or 40. But I'm talking about the hair fall that it seems like you're talking about. If there are bacteria there, then a very good thing to do is to take that neem, those leaves I was talking about, and put that in your hair for just 5 minutes. And then wash it out with that green gram dal. And if you do that several times, let's say you do it once every other day for a week, you should notice that the itching goes away and that the breakage and the dandruff go away. If it doesn't, you should just go find an Ayurvedic doctor who's going to look at your scalp, which you can't do because you can't get up there. Look at your scalp and then is going to give you a nice herbal preparation that doesn't include commercial shampoo. And that usually takes care of it. Now, if it's that you have hair lice or scabies or another thing, then you need to have a professional look at your hair. You shouldn't be doing this on your own because, as you know, lice and bed bugs and all are very contagious. So I just want to end by saying Ayurveda does not treat an infection or a disease. Ayurveda treats the patient. And because every patient is different, you can't just say, for this disease, this medicine. It'll work some of the time, like let's say 20% of the time, but people are different. And so treating a hair infection in a child is different than in an elder. Treating a hair infection in someone who has diabetes is different from treating someone who doesn't have diabetes, or treating someone that's taking certain medicines like antibiotics is different from treating someone who hasn't taken those. So it's an overview, but you should definitely try for the first week to use these neem remedies. And I hope that that helps you, Vishwanathji.
Madam, thank you. We are also live on the YouTube, and there are some questions on the YouTube. If you permit me, I would just like to take those questions on, ask you those questions.
Okay.
The first question is, Madam, we are all talking about the antibiotics, and since all the allopathic antibiotics that have been developed are no more working on the bugs. Now, from the Ayurveda side, you talked about neem and turmeric. These are also antibiotics as far as Ayurveda is concerned.
Yes.
Now, why don't we switch on to this Ayurvedic antibiotics for treating the discussions is one of the questions.
Why don't we switch on to treating with neem and these antibiotics for what disease? For what, you mean in general?
In general, madam.
Well, many do. I actually don't use a lot of allopathic medicines in my practice, and my patients that come to me do not come to me for antibiotics. Yes, I can write prescriptions, and I paid a lot of money to get the right to do so. But I find that most of the time, it doesn't help the patient as well long term as using some of these herbs. So I recommend herbs actively to patients who want to use them. But the thing is that you have to want to use them, and that is dependent on how you were brought up. To be honest, most of us who are Indian had, at least our grandparents or our great-grandparents, everyone was using Ayurveda, because English medicine wasn't really in India until the 18-something, right? The late 1800s. And so our grandparents for sure were using Ayurveda. But some of our ancestors decided that they want to use very modernized things because it's very cool, to ride around on a motorcycle and have the latest iPhone and have the gadgets. So to use neem and turmeric is considered to be primitive, backwards, simpleton, farmer, rural, and uneducated. And those kind of ideas that we have about Indian traditional medicines is exactly what the British wanted of us. And it's exactly what people who say that, why don't we know about this? You are the victims of exactly that. So all you have to do is go and start reading about these things, because we're so blessed. Every single person can go out and find neem and turmeric and guruchi if you want to, and you can start getting educated very quickly. So the question of why don't we use them in general is that you don't use them in general. Many people do use them in general. And in fact, the World Health Organization says that traditional ancient medicines are used by more than half of Indian people for their medical and healthcare.
Madam, let us take the next question, madam. It's one, I think, Neha Ranga. This is regarding one of the Government of India's decision recently, wherein the Government of India is permitting Ayurvedic doctors to perform some of the surgeries to a limited extent. And probably, Charaka Samhita talks about a lot of these things. Now, our question is it good to allow Ayurvedic doctors to perform operations now? Is it a good step? This is one of the questions. I don't know whether it is the right question or not.
It's
but
okay.
This is what I've been told, madam.
All right, so I'll weave that in. First, it's the Sushruta Samhita, not the Charaka Samhita, that talks about surgery primarily. Yeah. Charaka does do some procedures, but if you want to understand surgeries, you should look at the Sushruta Samhita. Sushruta was a physician in Varanasi, which is my place where I live. So we learn a lot about Sushruta. And Sushruta is considered to be the first surgeon because he took the time to write a book about how to do surgery. As it happens, every Ayurvedically trained physician at a BAMS, Bachelor of Ayurvedic Medicine and Surgery school in India, learns surgery. And for the last 40, 50 years, they have been permitted to do certain surgical procedures. So that's been going on. What wasn't in the law before was that it wasn't specifically stated that these are the operations that they commonly do. So the law just decided that it's better for us to just delineate the operations that they're already doing and just put them down on paper. And that inflamed the modern medical doctors of allopathy who feel that it's unfair for Ayurvedic surgeons to suddenly start doing surgery. But they're not suddenly doing it. When I was at BHU, I was learning surgical techniques from the OB-GYN doctors and the surgeons. And there are certain surgeries that Ayurvedic doctors have been doing for 100 years, which are superior for the treatment of certain diseases that are considered incurable by modern medicine, such as fistulas down near the rectum. They are not really curable by modern medicine. There are also certain cancers that are treated with surgery in modern medicine where they create a lot of side effects. But when Ayurveda does them, it doesn't, because they use plants and herbs as a preparation and in the course of the surgery. And there are a lot of women's conditions, such as fibroids, that are better treated by surgical procedures of Ayurveda. These have been going on for millennia, but suddenly the allopaths became aware of it, and so they have been speaking out. That's part one. Second part is that many of the antibiotic problems that happen in surgeries are why the surgeries go bad, both in America and here. You know, I was trained in surgery in New York, and we would have complications from antibiotics and unexpected infections. If you use plant-based herbs and decoctions of those herbs, as I described earlier, many times you avert the side effects of those infections. And that's an important addition for any patient that wants the best outcome. Last, I just want to say about the surgeons that surgeons should understand that Ayurvedic doctors are not all going to get up right now today and start becoming surgeons. The ones that are already surgeons are going to get training. And I, as an allopathic doctor, can tell you that in India, there are plenty of allopathic surgeons who are not that good. So to raise the bar for everyone to have to do surgery in a higher standard is really good for the patient. It's not against modern medicine and it's not against Ayurveda. Everyone should get certified for competence, and that is what these recent laws are trying to do. But everyone is spinning it to make it seem like it's Ayurveda against allopathy. If we just focus on the patient, we just do what's best for the patient.
Thank you, madam. The next question, madam, is from Mr. Vinod. He says, madam, I have a copy of your book, Everyday Ayurveda, and I love reading it. So could you please suggest some remedies for reducing the blood cholesterol?
So everyone has blood cholesterol for a different reason. You have to go and check with an Ayurvedic doctor as to exactly why it's happening. There are many things that the doctor will do, but the first thing that the Ayurvedic physician will do is she or he will give you something to clean your gut. So you should first get a sense, watch yourself for a few days and see how is your appetite. You have a good solid appetite. What's your food pattern? What's your bowel movements pattern? Do you have a nice thick brown banana every morning when you wake up, or do you have little marbles or little pebbles or little pencils? What's your bowel movement like? If you're not clearing your bowels, there's a problem in your gut and that has to be fixed. There are about, I think I use maybe 20 or 30 different remedies depending on the patient. I also look at the sleep cycle. I look at your emotional stresses. I look at how tired you are. And I take these 6-7 factors, I put them together, and then I check to see what you actually need in order to reduce the cholesterol. Usually it's a cleaning out of your Ranjaka Pitta, which means your liver's metabolism. And that's very easily done by a good liver remedy, but you have to pick the right one. So just going out and getting Liv 52 or Livtone is fine if you just want to start somewhere, but you should really see an Ayurvedic doctor so that you bring your cholesterol bring your cholesterol back to balance, bring your HDLs up, while making the whole body functional. Because what you don't want is for your numbers to look good, but you feel terrible, right? So that's my response to you. And thank you for reading Everyday Ayurveda.
Madam, I'm just taking up the last question here.
Sure.
In India, we Indians eat quite a lot of carbohydrates, almost 3 times in a day.
Yes.
Does our body really need that much of carbohydrates?
So it's not about carbohydrates, it's about the processing of carbohydrates and what those carbohydrates do to your body. So we look at something called the gunas, the qualities. If that carbohydrate is purely harvested, purely cultivated, then purely harvested, then purely brought to market, it's not going to make you gain weight. It's actually going to build up your health. So rice for Indians is one of the best. If you live in the north and you're indigenous to the areas that grow wheat is good. Moong dal is good. These are the three that are considered to be the best foods, and then pure cow's milk. Now, with each of these, there are problems because as commercial, the farmers, right, they harvest things, but then those groups that purchase those foods change them around and put preservatives to keep bacteria from growing in them. Preservatives are anti-life. And when we swallow that anti-life, our fire gets changed in our body, our digestive enzymes. And so we end up not being able to process those carbohydrates and proteins well. And that's why we have health problems. So if you're an actual farmer growing the food, or if you can make friends with a farmer and purchase your rice and your wheat, your godhuma, your dal from those people and then bring them home and cook them yourself, you're going to find that it's not about the carbs, but those particular foods are super healthy for you and keep you well. And if you don't understand these, go to a grandmother or a very old person that's at least 80 years old, and they will tell you about these foods and how it doesn't matter about carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. It matters how you digest it. Dr. Gopal will eat something and maybe he won't gain a single gram of weight. Someone else, like me, might eat it and I'll gain 2 grams of weight. And someone else will eat it and they'll gain a kilo of weight. Why? It's not about the carbohydrate. It's about the way that you digest the food. Ayurveda calls that Jatar Agni. Jatar Agni is that ability that your gut has to take whatever you feed it and to transform it, take out the nutrients, and send them to your tissues in the correct way to build up your body and your body's strength. So Ayurveda teaches you not to worry about the carbohydrates, but to focus on the game of Agni in your body. Agni is that digestive fire. Thank you for your question.
Madam, we are forced to take one more question, and I'm sorry if I'm troubling you too much. Well, the question is something like this. In order to boost the immune system in our body, there are several herbal tea ingredients which are in the market. What's your opinion on this?
Well, some of the teas are very good. Absolutely. And it's wonderful that they are there, but they shouldn't be used as teas, some of them. They should be used as decoctions. So you should put in 4 times the water, add the herb, and let it boil down to evaporating 3/4 of the water. So 1/4 of it is left. So if you start with a liter, you should have 250 mLs left. In that process, whatever's left in those of those herbs, you can drink that. That is very good for you. And people in different parts of the country have different herbs that work. We've been using it this year in 2020 for obvious reasons. And I certainly think that having ginger and black pepper and Guruchi, which I mentioned before, and Yashti Madhu, which is called muleti in the north. It's licorice in English. These are all different options. Which ones to put together depends on which symptoms you have. And yes, the teas, many of them are made for your convenience and they're excellent, but you need to know about the herbs. If you're an older person that knows about the herbs or a young person who loves studying the herbs, you already know which tea to use. So yes, the teas are great. But if you don't know what to do and you're buying it the way you would just buy any kind of, new product, then you need to go and get educated. Please bring Ayurveda back into your life. It's your birthright. It's part of your genes. And it is a really great tool against the superbugs epidemic, pandemic that we have. if you use it. If you don't use it, those teas are not useful. They're not really worth anything unless you understand the wisdom in the tea. Thank you, sir.
Oh, thank you very much, madam. I think we are running short of time. And finally, on behalf of National Council of Science Museums and Vishweshwara Industrial and Technological Museum, today's speaker, Dr. Bhaswati Bhattacharya, has spared her valuable time and spoke in length about the various aspects of Ayurveda. And madam, we are really indebted to you for finding your time and sparing your valuable time with us this afternoon. On behalf of this organization, I would like to thank you, madam, for being with us. And also throwing light on the most important aspect of the traditional medicine of India, namely Ayurveda. And also encouraging us to make Ayurveda as part of our lifestyle from today onwards at least. Madam, once again, thank you for this. And I'd like to also thank all the participants for having joined us this afternoon for this evening's talk and for asking questions to the madam. And I'm sure, as madam expects all of us, let's make Ayurveda part of our life from today. So with this concluding remarks, I would like to sign off and thank the speaker, Dr. Bhaswati Bhattacharya, once again for a valuable time and throwing light on various aspects of Ayurveda, and all the participants for joining us this afternoon. Thank you, madam. Thank you, all the participants. Good day.
Dinesh, Dinesh, you can take me on. Tomorrow,